ever stopped to wonder why we've had undead priests for the longest time, yet they can't be paladins for some reason? Well, so did Blizzard, since they've never really had a concrete answer to this question. The actual practical answer is they thought shadow priests fit really well for the Forsaken, and obviously they can't just give them half a class, just a single spec, so they sort of justified the light bit by slightly altering the lore. However, now this isn't even clickbait. In a recent interview, Blizzard literally confirmed that they plan to remove all race class restrictions over time, and that it will take more or less ground being set up for some of them. Seeing that the undead paladins will barely need any, since undead paladins actually exist in the lore, how will they be explained, and what is the argument for having them? Did you know that if you use Python software like Windows, you are very vulnerable to viruses and other types of malicious activity? Well, the sponsor of this video, Royal City Keys, has the solution, as you can get cheap licenses, as in $2-3 cheap, and there are also a bunch of other games and software you can choose from. Best of all, if you use my code DORON, you will get an additional 10% off, so if you want to support the channel and get something for yourself, check out my link in the description or the QR code. It is obvious that the classes have changed over the years, and originally the restrictions were quite strict, and it is in fact what made the factions really different from each other, as initially you could only be Alliance if you wanted to be a Paladin, or Horde if you wanted to be a Shaman. However, over the years that really changed, and when I say really changed, I mean really changed. It kinda started with the really flimsy justifications of Tauren Paladins, the Sun Druids becoming Paladins, but then we got actuals on the Lari Troll Paladins, and we literally have Goblin Shamans that, just make contracts with the Elementals and use actual mechanical totems, and now, most recently, we will be getting Tauren Rogues, which is kind of absurd when you consider their bulk and just overall appearance and size. Now, I'm not saying this is bad, since Blizzard decided to do all these and make all these justifications. Seriously, it might just be the best to just go all the way with this. Seriously, what even is the point of blocking the remaining few? Let's just justify all of them. Most recently, in Dragonflight, they confirmed 8 new race class combos, but they said in another interview that they plan to eventually rule out all the restrictions, and while some are possible, they will, for others, need to make a lot of new lore. Now, this brings us to the topic of this video, and those are undead paladins. What are they? Will they be added soon? And how will they be explained in the lore? What will be the justification? In terms of will and when they will be added, I'd say yes, and quite soon. We literally have a bunch of new lore with Calia Menethil. The Forsaken are more relevant than they have been in ages. They're kinda approaching a brand new era in their existence. There is light involved, so it is obviously going to happen quite soon, and I think this might be the first on the list of these new upcoming combinations. You need to keep in mind that people have been wondering for ages, why exactly can the Forsaken be priests but they can't be paladins? And someone even asked this question on BlizzCon, and then Blizzard kinda bumbled around with the answer. First they said something along the lines of, priests use the light for preservation, rejuvenation, while paladins are the more fanatical ones, they use it for offense, for attacking, but then they realized that paladins can also heal, the priests can also attack, and they literally just said like, we have no idea actually why, we'll just kind of figure it out later on. However, the answer to this is kind of obvious when you think about it from the practical side of things. It is a compromise they made a long time ago that now they will need to expand. Here's the thing, Shadow Priests are a spec that are completely different than the Light one. They're more similar to Warlocks than anything else, and really, they could just be a class of their own. Now, imagine if the Forsaken, the Undead, can't be Shadow Priests. That would literally be blasphemy. It's like the spec was built for them, the Dark Undead Mage, this entire thing. However, what was Blizzard to do? Just give them like, what, half a class and make precedents to just mess up the entire balance of the game? Or they could just make small adjustments to the existing lore. So they came up with some lore that some undead can still control the light, and that they're kinda few and far between, even in undead, although it kinda hurts them every time they use the light. Now, they didn't extend this justification to paladins, because paladins are entirely a light class, they don't really have a dark spec, so it was not needed. But think about it, back then there was an actual undead paladin present in the lore, so there actually is a justification. This person was known as Sir Zeliak, and he was a Knight of the Silver Hand, incredibly dedicated to the light. In fact, so dedicated that his faith in the light persisted even in a death, and while his body was forced to obey Kel'Thuzad through magic, he still managed to retain his sanity and morals despite this incredible corruption. So literally, there is a precedent for this, and there has been one for a really long time. However, what is really important to note is that the lore has changed. It has drastically changed over the past decade or two. We have seen the universe traveling army of the light. We have seen the Naru. We are literally getting orcish priests now, and we've had mega priest orcs for a while. There are Tauren paladins, and the once simple concept of the light being this thing you really need to have faith in just seriously changed. It's kind of like it's not even a thing anymore. We learned that the light is literally just a cosmological force that exists. While it is generally benevolent towards us, it is also fanatical and just wants to push its own agenda upon the universe. The best example is when Zera wanted to take over Illidan by force and just turned him into a light pawn. Now, things got even crazier over the years. We got the first ever light-bound undead in the shape of Calia Menethil that is now one of the actual Forsaken leaders, as Sylvanas is serving jail time. Then most recently, we learned that necromancy isn't what we believed it to be, but it is just a thing that can be used by every possible cosmological force. Most of the undead were created by death magic, but Calia was raised by light magic, and she's literally a light undead. Just this little lore bit alone changes and retcons a lot of the old lore. While it might not outright retcon old lore, it definitely makes it a lot more vague and just unclear. Now, I know what you may be thinking, isn't this kinda incredibly contradictory? Blizzard constantly made these stories of how the undead were these tragic characters, how this was a curse, and now it turns out that they're just under the influence of a certain type of magic and it isn't really all that bad. Well, I don't really have much of an answer for this. It is actually contradictory, but I think we just kinda have to deal with it. This is just a new lore and there is no way to go back to the old, more simpler times. However, the reason I'm telling you this isn't to complain about the way the lore changed and the retcons and all this stuff, but to talk about how the new lore will be shaping the new lore that is to come. This here is the crucial bit. Now, when you think about all these changes to the source of undeath, light, shadowlands and all that stuff, and the fact that a light-bound undead is leading the Forsaken, the undead paladins really don't seem outlandish whatsoever. Ages ago, this really seemed like something unholy, but we literally got orc priests that now wield the light, so really this one is kinda as tame as it gets, especially since we've always had light undead priests and there were actual examples of undead paladins. So really, in the case of this, it is obvious that it will be coming. Definitely not at the start of Dragonflight, as we're getting 8 new race class combos that they just announced, but possibly by the end of the expansion, maybe in a patch or the next expansion that is to come. All hints are pointing at Calia Menethil, light being relevant, Blizzard wanting to reduce restrictions, restore Lordaeron, normalization relations within the Horde and Alliance. Really, everything is kinda setting up the ground for it. Really, they wouldn't have to do any sort of big changes to the existing lore, and either they could just go ahead with the fact that some undead practice the light and remain as paladins in undeath, or this could be some sort of a new order that will be related to Calia Menethil, as really at the moment she seems like one of the key Forsaken characters in the future. Thank you for watching. Check out where Lordaeron be a neutral hub in the future by clicking on the screen, and check out Doronsmovies Academy for videos on real world history. See you next time.